Hello Magic players, Barry White here for Magic Untapped. You know, the original Ravnica block is one of the most important and impactful blocks and sets in the history of Magic the Gathering. And there's actually a story as to how it even came about in the first place. Joining me is Magic the Gathering head designer Mark Rosewater. Mark, how did the original Ravnica block come to be?
Well, Ravnica first came about because we decided we were going to do another multicolor block. So the Invasion was kind of the start of the themed blocks. And Invasion had been a multicolor block and had been very popular. And so a bunch of years had gone by. I'm like, you know what? It's time for another multicolor block. But we had done Invasion. And so I decided I wanted to do a multicolor block that was not Invasion. And so Invasion was all about playing as many colors as you could. So I'm like, okay, what's the opposite end of that spectrum? You know, well, I mean, to be a goal set, it had to at least be two colors. So I'm like, okay, what if it's all about playing two colors rather than playing 4 or 5 colors like Invasion? What if it was about playing 2 colors? And so that's where I started. I said, okay, it's a Magic set all about playing 2 colors. That was the jumping off point of the set.
And of course, you mentioned the Invasion block. What were some of the lessons that you guys learned from Invasion that you were able to employ with Ravnica?
Well, I mean, one of the big lessons we learned from Invasion was one of the problems when you play a lot of colors is what we call sort of mana soup problems, right? Where if I make it easy to play 5 colors, well, why aren't you just playing the best cards? Like, you know, that the color wheel exists in Magic for a very important purpose, which is to give identity, you know, to give, like, we want you to say, oh, card A is good and card B is good, but it might not be easy to play card A with card B. And a lot of the definition of the game, a lot of what makes sort of a trading card game work is that there's some differentiation between things you could choose. And in Invasion, one of the problems we had was it got a little soupy in the sense that you could play a lot of best of decks where I just draft all the good things and then put them all in the same deck. So one of the reasons we were looking to sort of go at the other end of the spectrum, besides differentiating ourselves from Invasion, was also, you know, we still wanted to make sure that the color pie mattered in a key way. And what we ended up doing, what ended up being kind of the biggest charm of Ravnica is something that actually Brady Domermuth, who was the creative director at the time, I had gone to him and I had said, I want to do all 10 2-color pairs at equal value. I want all 10 2-color pairs to exist. And I said to him, okay, what kind of world are we doing? What should we do with this? And he came back with the idea of, okay, well, what if we factionize, you know, what if we give an identity to each of them in the creative? What if each of the 10 pairs meant something? And he came back with the idea of guilds in a city. And then once I heard that, I'm like, oh, I'm all in. That sounds awesome. And then once I realized that, another big thing, Ravnica was the first set that I was the head designer when we planned the block. I sort of became head designer like in the middle of Champions, but I hadn't planned in it. I just sort of made it happen, but I wasn't there on the planning part. So with Ravnica, I really was trying to do more block planning, and I was trying to do something that I called the pie method, which is let's make a block in which each set has its own identity, but they come together to make a larger identity. And that when you saw the first set, you would know what the second and third set would be up to. And so once we had the idea of the guilds, I'm like, okay, it's going to be hard to fit all 10 guilds in one set anyway. What if we spread them across the block? What if this isn't a single set thing? What if this is a block thing? And then looking at the sizes of the set, I said, okay, well, let's do 4-3-3 because we have a large, small, small. And that seemed to be the greatest way to break them up. And that was controversial at the time. Like when I sort of said when I first talked to the rest of R&D, I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. It's a set all about color pairs, but this first set is going to have 4 color pairs and the rest aren't going to appear. We're not going to see them. And then the next set's going to have 3, and the first 4 aren't going to be there. The last 3 aren't going to be there. And then we'll do the last one, and that's have 3 we haven't seen yet. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, no, just this set will do that. And at the time, it wasn't the kind of thing we did. We color balanced everything all the time, and it just was a weird idea. And I eventually got them warmed up to it. But it was, at the time, a little bit of a radical idea when I first pitched it.
Yeah, I'm sure at the time it did seem like a bit of a radical idea splitting up the guilds like that, but once you decided to do it, how did you decide which guilds went into which set in that original Ravnica block?
So once we knew we were doing the 4-3-3 method, really what happened was we said, okay, we made a list. So we have a lot of data. So we said, from our data, what are the most popular guilds? What are the least popular guilds? So first off, we knew that we wanted to spread them out so that like there were popular guilds in each of the 3 sets. Also, I wanted a certain amount of color balance. So what that meant with 4-3-3 was in the set of 4, 3 colors would show up twice, and then 2 colors would show up once. And then in the 3s, every color would show up once, and 1 color would show up twice. And obviously, the 2 colors that show up twice in the second 3 sets were the 2 colors that didn't show up twice in the first set. And so there's to get the color balance. So it was really in the thing of how do we divide them up so the ones we knew people wanted we spread amongst all of them, and we needed the color balance. And then there's a few story reasons. I think when they were trying to figure out the story, the main character I think was in Boros, so they wanted Boros in the first set, and there were a couple. Like I said, it was a combination of story and balance, and just making sure we sort of got a little. Every set had something that we thought would excite players.
Okay, very interesting as always, Mark. Thank you very much for your time. Mark Rosewater, head designer of Magic: The Gathering. I'm Barry White for Magic Untapped.